Hi, I'm Joel Ballou, and this is my business continuity plan for U.S. Oil Refining & Co. So what is U.S. Oil? It is a refinery based in the port of Tacoma, Washington. All processes are contained within the facility except for a jet fuel pipeline that supplies Joint Base Lewis McChord. It has a storage capacity of 2.7 million barrels, and it has over 100 employees. So this BCP has been made to assist in the continuing of operations at USOR and its constituent, the McChord Pipeline Company, during an emergency. The continuing of USOR's operations relies on the safety of its employees, the containment of crises, the protection of critical operations, and the recovery of compromised operations in a fast and safe manner. Minimizing environmental impact is a unique and critical priority throughout any emergency operations. For the scope, we're going to cover 3 different critical operations: the recovery times and point objectives, the communication method and communication throughout the company's organization, resource requirements, company organization, equipment and supplies, vital records, stakeholder communications, mission critical systems, revision methods, testing, planning, training, and relocation process. So for our assumptions for this BCP, we're going to assume that all transportation on major highways has not been affected during a disaster. Key personnel and adequate number of employees are available on site. Emergency equipment that is needed is ready and available at the cache locations, which it should be. All employees have been legally certified to operate during a crisis. Critical functions are not discussed in this plan, are functioning. And other entities are not impeding in the containment or recovery activities, which would be normal. So for the company organizational structure, the vice presidents have executive authority during a crisis over the business segments that they oversee. If the crisis overlaps different segments, then the vice presidents will have to agree on a decision, and if they cannot, then the controller will make the executive decision. During a crisis, the lower-level supervisors and managers may be deployed to oversee the on-site operations during the crisis. In this case, a lower-level employee would assume the manager or supervisor position. So this is the organizational chart, which with each one of the departments defined. For the communication, it goes from the vice president down during an emergency. And this is done through email first. He will send out a mass email to all employees at the refinery, and then after that, through phone calls and text messaging, he will be notifying the necessary managers and supervisors, who will then delegate responsibilities to the lower level employees. During any crisis, the Tacoma Fire Department is immediately notified by the Human Resources rep. And then they are not allowed on site. They actually wait outside until USOR communicates with them. As for the media, they are always interested in what's going on at the refinery during a crisis. The only person who is allowed to speak to the media is the Human Resources rep. And then communication for day-to-day would remain the same. So for our first critical function, this is a crude oil charge pump. So this is what pumps crude oil into the refinery. And there are 4 backups for the crude oil charge pump that will kick in within 10 seconds if the primary is shut down. The recovery time objective is 1 minute, and recovery point objective is real time. So this data is important because it records how much crude oil is being accepted into the refinery. There is a small time frame where error is acceptable. After that, it could cause damage. So you could overfill tanks if the data is not being recorded. You could be pumping them into the wrong locations, and this could cause explosions and fire, oil spills. It could cause great damage. And the department that oversees this is the Product Supply and Marketing, and that is overseen by George Hills. So for our second critical function, we have our heater fuel hydrogen sulfide monitoring system. So this monitors the hydrogen sulfide, which is poisonous, the levels that are being produced, and how much is in the air. There's always a small amount in the air, so it's important to make sure that not too much is being released. It prevents employees from being poisoned, protects the environment, and it also meets the legal standards. But as a backup, each employee wears a portable hydrogen sulfide monitor that will vibrate and sound an alarm in case if they are exposed to high levels of the hydrogen sulfide. And then that is overseen by the health, safety, and security. For our third critical function, we have the butane railcar system. So the butane railcar system transports butane to the customers, and if it is shut down, they won't be able to supply unless they have the backup of using trucks. Recovery time objective is 2 days, and the recovery point objective is the last backup. For data, the sensors record the amount of butane that's being put into the car to make sure they're not overfilled. This is to meet legal standards and safety standards. It is overseen by Rail Services, and the manager is Randy Morey. So for resource requirements, one of the most important ones is rain-for-rent tanks. So these are giant portable tanks that can hold several hundred gallons of any material, solid or liquid. It can contain hazardous substances, corrosive substances, and they can be stored strategically around the refinery. These are used in case of an emergency, and they're also used in day-to-day operations. Mobile cell phones are very important. Every employee has a company-issued cell phone that they must carry with them at all times when they're on the refinery in case of a crisis or emergency. There's also emergency landlines in strategic locations around the refinery, and this allows for communication in case the cell phones are not working. There are also bikes placed around the refinery. This allows for faster transportation. And there's also cars, company cars, that can be used and driven nearly everywhere on site unless otherwise specified. As we stated earlier, a required resource requirement is the personal H2O monitors. In addition to that, there are vacuum trucks, giant trucks that suck liquid and solids into a tank. And those are used in day-to-day operations, and they're also used during an emergency. We have PPE, personal protective equipment. This includes things like safety glasses, hard hats, gloves, fire retardant clothing. These are used every day at the refinery. And lastly, we have the staff. The number of staff on site varies depending on the day, but without those staff, they would not be able to respond in an emergency. For critical equipment and supplies, spare parts for the pumps and equipment. So if anything breaks down, it needs to be repaired quickly. So lots of spare parts are kept in warehouses. There are 4 large warehouses, and then there are several small containment cells that also hold spare parts for the pumps. Cell phones and radios. Anybody who goes into the operating facility at the refinery must be carrying their own personal radio and their cell phone. For fasteners and tools, these are also kept in the warehouses. They are regulated, checked out to certain people, and they have to be checked back in. They're also maintained and repaired if necessary. Overstarter parts, wiring, small electrical supplies. These are supplied on a weekly basis to the refinery through the receiving. For gloves, small metal parts, and paint supplies, these are also brought to the refinery either monthly or weekly. For vital records, we have the data vibration sheet and oil analysis sheet. So this is for the crude oil charge pump that we spoke about earlier. The type of media, it can be stored electronically or on paper, and it is located in the engineering library. For maintenance planning and scheduling, this is in relation to the butane railcar system and other important systems at the refinery. It can be paper or electronic, and it is also stored in the engineering library. Thermal imaging and laser alignment. This is for the heater fuel gas hydrogen sulfide monitoring system. So the hydrogen sulfide is produced in mass quantities at the refinery, and it is important to monitor the amount that is being produced so that you can store, destroy, or continue refining the gas in order to change it into a different product. So this system allows them to monitor that. It is stored electronically and on paper. This one is due to legal requirements, and it is also stored in the engineering library. For stakeholder communications, This includes communication to the customers and the vendors. Important customers include Costco, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Safeway, Jackpot, and Love's Truck Stops. These are their largest customers. They are contacted by the marketing team, and that is done through phone and email. So they would be contacted if there's a problem supplying material or products to them, and if there has been a change in the method of supply. So if the pipeline going to Joint Base Lewis McChord is shut down, then we would begin supplying jet fuel by truck most likely. For vendors, we have Paramount Supply, Puget Sound Radio, Tacoma Screw, Platt Electric, and Grainer Supply. So these are all contacted by the corresponding departments at the refinery that would deal directly with them, such as Tacoma Screw is contacted by the maintenance department. Puget Sound Radio is contacted by the Health, Safety, and Security Department, and this contact is done through phone and email, which is available to the departments. So for mission critical systems, we have PI, the intranet, and the AMP. So the PI system provides live feed of data to the operators so that they can adjust the ongoing day-to-day operations at the refinery. So with the giant heaters, the boilers, monitoring how much is being pushed out by the pumps. This is all done through the PI system that is available on every single desktop computer at the refinery. There is no direct backup to the system, but the data is backed up in multiple locations, including on the intranet and in the cloud. So for the intranet, so this is USOR's private network that contains all data stored, shared files, email communication, and other department-specific programs. So this is what every desktop computer at the refinery runs off of. It stores live data collected through systems like PI and distributes the data to different programs and systems for a specific department use. So it can take data from live systems and relocate it into programs so that it can be consumed and it's more functional for the employees. There's no well, there is a backup for the data. There is no backup for the actual system. The data is backed up on hardware, software, and in cloud base. It is incredibly important, and it is maintained regularly through contracted IT. So for the AMP, this monitors individual equipment to make sure that it's performing, that there's no problem. So this would regulate the amount of hours that a pump is used, or the velocity of a liquid going through certain pipes. This is just data to make sure that it's functioning properly. If you notice that a pump is not producing at a high enough PSI, you would know that through the AMP. The data is backed up and there's no replacement for the program. The data is backed up on the intranet. So for testing, planning, training, and revisions, so all the plans in case of a crisis are trained through the employees on a monthly, semi-annually, annually, and even on a 5-year basis, depending on what they're training for. There's a variety of crises that can happen at the refinery, including fire, explosion, large spills, power outages. Lightning strikes have been a problem in the past several years. So the employees are trained so that they would know what to do in the crisis, what roles that they would need to fulfill. So as the organizational chart changes with every crisis, it's important to be the handyman and be able to do many different things. For the planning, this is mostly done through the Health, Safety, and Security Department and the Environmental Department. So they create the plans that are used for very specific crises, and these plans are available on paper and electronic in the Environmental Library and in various offices. And these are revised somewhat regularly. After a crisis has happened, they are always revised, they are updated. Most recently, they had a crisis where the oil pipeline was punctured, and then they realized that they needed to change the organizational structure because engineers at the refinery were not able to go to the on-site location, so the communication methods had to be changed. So revisions are made regularly, and they are done by mostly the Environmental Department. And For the relocation process, this is the last bit. There isn't really a relocation plan because things cannot be relocated. All the large equipment, the operations are all on site. You can't move the systems like Pi. These are giant, giant computers that take up entire buildings basically, and it's not able to be portable. So that's my presentation. Thank you.